Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. If you're new to The Authority File, you can listen to and find previous episodes on most of the major podcast platforms, and we encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter, The Authority File Roundup, which keeps you updated on previous, current, and upcoming Authority File episodes. You can subscribe at choice360.org by clicking on the newsletter banner at the top of the homepage. My guests for this four-part series are Stephanie Espinoza Villamore, e-learning librarian at the College of Southern Nevada, and Kimberly Shattuck, student success librarian and an assistant professor at Northern Illinois University. Stephanie and Kimberly are co-authors of the book Practical Marketing for the Academic Library, out now from ABC Clio. The title says it all, really. Their book is a Marketing 101 approach to promoting library services and resources, not just to students, but the broader campus community as well. The title is approachable, appropriate for any kind of academic library, and considers a holistic approach to marketing, which includes the business-like tactics of marketing as well as the more empathetic methods that account for the variety of challenges and needs of a library's patrons. This four-part series is brought to you with support from ABC Clio. In this episode, Stephanie and Kimberly dig into some of the tactics behind identifying a library's audience and how to tailor messaging appropriately. Okay, so who would you describe as the primary audiences of a library's marketing strategy?
So we break it down in the book as pretty much students, faculty, and staff, and then administration. And so the students obviously are the ones who are coming to college. They're taking classes, no matter what their age, what their background is. We see students of all types. At a community college where I work, the average age of our student is 25. So we actually get a lot of non-traditional students. So in addition to like the fresh out of high school students, we've got older students. We've even had students like in their 60s and 70s coming back to school. So we have that demographic, which is very unique and sometimes a challenge to market to because they come across this whole age range. It's not just, the tech savvy high school, just out of high school students on TikTok. We also have like 60-year-old students that we have to market to who are going to be getting messages in different ways. And then we have faculty and staff. So we have the faculty who see the students every day, they're they have the opportunity to reach students more directly because they're teaching classes. And so they can send their messaging to the students, but then they also might want to use the library for their own purposes. And then we have staff members who work on campus and are also on the front lines working with students, but then they also might not be as familiar with the library has to offer. And then finally, administrators who, they're the ones who have the purse strings, and they're the ones who are going to come and say, hey, what is the library doing to make the college look good? And how are our numbers doing? And what are stories you guys communicating that I can tell the other administrators and the other higher ups? So those are kind of the three audiences that we focus on in the book. And those are typically who we would see come into the library or utilize library resources.
Right, great. So those are pretty distinct audience segments. How does the messaging therefore differ between, say, students and teaching faculty or even administration?
I would say to begin with students, we really are focusing on kind of the welcoming aspect. We want you to come in, whether in is the physical space, whether in is the library website. We want to make sure that you're aware that we exist and that how to get to us and how to reach out if you need help. Versus faculty, it's kind of more, most faculty know that the library exists. They always have friendly interactions with librarians, but it's more, what can we do for you? What do we have to offer that you're going to take advantage of, that you're going to share with your students? And, being able to send those messages in the mediums that work for them. So, a student we might not be able to reach unless it's through social media or maybe through word of mouth, maybe a big display at the front of the library. A faculty member, we might have to get 5 minutes of time at a school or department meeting. We might have to send out an email blast. And then as far as administrators, it can be even more challenging to reach our administrators because, we might only be able to reach the administrative assistant. And so making sure that we can get the message to them And so that message might be more focused on the numbers, like, do we have the assessment data to show that, hey, this many students are using the library in this way. Here's the percentages. We can send you a really quick fact. We're not going to send a message that's super lengthy. We want something that's just short and sweet so they can use that soundbite when they speak to other administrators, when they're going up above their heads. And so it's kind of tailoring to depend on what the audience is and what they're kind of looking to get from the library.
Yeah, you raise a good point there. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit more about the delivery mechanisms of those messages, and how a librarian or a library might sort of figure out what the best way is to reach those segments. So, you mentioned social media, for example, for students. What are some of the exercises someone might go through to say, okay, here's the best way we can reach a person, whether it's a faculty member, a student, or administrator?
So here's more that marketing business world talk.
Right.
But one thing that libraries can do is use personas. So this would be creating a kind of a fake user and doing some research about your different user groups. So you could do research about your instructors, your adjunct faculty, for instance, and create a persona. You could learn about their communication preferences and find out, oh, a lot of them don't actually check their university email, so we need another way to contact them. And you can do that with focus groups. That's a great way, with surveys. But you create these different personas, again, with these kind of fake users based on what you know about these different user groups.
Mhm.
And you can use that to kind of tailor your messaging and figure out what message channels go best with which different user types.
Excellent, excellent. So obviously, students and faculty need to hear from the library, but I want to focus on administration a little bit. Why is it also important to market to administration? How is this messaging to this audience uniquely different from what might be directed to students or faculty?
Well, definitely, administration, as Stephanie mentioned, controls the budget. So that's the number one. They also have a lot of strong relationships. So administration has power. You can enlist different units on campus if administration is behind your initiatives.
Mhm. Excellent. And then your book highlights marketing practices that can be utilized across any type of campus by any type of library. But what are some of the key communication priorities that most libraries have in common?
I think number one is just operational. So communicating any sort of operational changes like library hours. And this was very important during the COVID-19 pandemic when our libraries, a lot of them had to shut their doors.
Hmm.
So a lot of changes there, communicating those just basic informational items. But then secondly, definitely promoting services and resources. That is the common theme amongst all libraries and all library types.
Excellent. So it's in the title, so I have to ask, and Stephanie, you talked a little bit about this earlier, but how are you defining marketing for the mind versus marketing for the heart? How are those two efforts different, and what are the unique goals?
So I can start with the mind, and then I'll let Stephanie talk about the heart,
Okay.
because that's the way we sort of split it up in the book. So marketing for the mind talks about those services and resources that I keep talking about. So that traditional sort of library services being oftentimes reference and instruction, interlibrary loans, circulation, and then our resources being our books, databases, even our spaces. So, how do we market those through different things like book displays, talking about marketing our reference services, maybe through social media, and then we have marketing for the mind, which is kind of a newer phenomenon.
So I'll talk a little bit about marketing from the heart. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of that empathetic marketing, which is a phrase that basically we are being empathetic to our students. We are thinking about them as people and not just customers. So, what might they need for themselves? Because if one need is not being met, like if they're hungry, if they're facing other challenges outside of school, they're not going to succeed in school until those basic needs have been met. And so when we market from the heart, we want to make sure that we are appealing to those other needs that make them up a person, their identities. So if they identify in a certain way, maybe we're having events that show, hey, we're welcoming to the population that you identify with. And so we want you to come in. We want you to feel comfortable in our spaces. We want you to feel safe in our spaces. And this is both physical spaces and virtual spaces. We also, once they're comfortable, of course, we hope that they will come back, but it's treating them like they're human beings, and we want them to be happy with our resources and services, but we also want them to know that we are taking them into account. And so, as I mentioned before, we have events like the therapy dogs, where students have an opportunity to de-stress. They can calm down petting a dog, and it brings students in. It also sometimes brings in faculty administrators. They love dogs too, but also like appealing to the humor of, we have a TikTok at our library, and so we'll have events on our social media. We'll have funny TikTok videos, and the students engage in it, and they love it because they recognize a meme that's currently going on, some trend that's going on TikTok, and they say, hey, the library's doing that too. The library can be funny. The library can be fun. And so it's not just about kind of being traditional. I mean, those are key things that we do, but it's also about, showing that we're human as well. So that's kind of the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important because if you think about library anxiety, which is a phenomenon that's been researched and proven that students are anxious about entering the library, using services, asking questions. So if we can sort of reframe what a library is and use humor and use emotion and be more welcoming to our students, I think that's really important.
Yeah, excellent point. You just heard from Stephanie Espinoza-Villamore, e-learning librarian at the College of Southern Nevada, and Kimberly Shattuck, student success librarian and an assistant professor at Northern Illinois University. Join us next week as we discuss why building a marketing team is crucial, even if you're just one person, and which of your colleagues should be on it. This 4-part series is brought to you with support from ABC Clio.
Some argue that marketing is everyone's job, and I agree that if you're a reference librarian and you don't have marketing responsibilities, that you still have a responsibility to communicate with your faculty, with your students. It really is in everyone's job, but because we need to be strategic about our marketing efforts, you might miss something. You might miss something big, or you might expend resources inefficiently if you're not doing some strategic planning around marketing.
As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.